Jeff Simley with the U.S. Geological Survey, and this is our Hydrography Webinar Series, Webinar 5. And like I said, I'm hosting today, and helping me out also is Sue Budo, Al Ray, and Allison Jason, also of the U.S. Geological Survey. The purpose of these webinars is to, one, to share success stories from users who have solved real-world problems using hydrographic data, to provide information on the NHD, WBD, and related products, and provide a forum for users similar to what might be encountered in a conference setting. Some of the example topics that we cover in these seminar series are hydrology, resource management, pollution control, fisheries, emergency management, mapping, and elevation hydrography integration. So today, our main speaker is going to talk about the USDA Forest Service Watershed Condition Framework, an approach for assessing and improving watershed condition with Mike Eberly. And then following that, we'll have questions and answers. I'll talk about that protocol in a second. We'll have two lightning talks today, basically 5-minute long talks. First of all, preserving high-quality riparian vegetation with David Ritchie, and then second, stream gauge drainage area boundaries with Curtis Price. And then we'll follow that with you answering a few questions for us about the value of this session. The audio is in listen-only mode, so we can't hear you out there. For audio-visual problems, the best thing to do is to try to log out and log back in again. And questions and answers, we'll use the chat feature in WebEx, so there won't be an opportunity for you to verbally ask questions, but rather do it through the chat. And then Sue Buto and Al Ray will monitor those questions that come in from the chat. And when we come to the end of Mike's talk, then they'll start reading off some of those questions, and Mike will have a chance then to answer them. We'll do that for about 10 minutes or so. Then at the very end of the session, after the lightning talks, just be aware that there's some poll questions to be aware of. Which parts of the presentation were most valuable, which parts of the presentation were least valuable, and what topics are you interested in learning more about in the future. So, also announce that the next Hydrography Seminar Series is January 21st, and we'll be talking about a high-resolution NHD+. So watch for announcements about that, and hope that you can join us then. Today's main topic, once again, is the USDA Forest Service Watershed Condition Framework, an approach for assessing and improving watershed condition with Mike Eberly. Mike is the Forest Service's Surface Water Program Leader. Since coming to the Forest Service in January 2011, his work has primarily focused on the agency's implementation of the Watershed Condition Framework through the development of policy, technical resources, and national guidance. In addition, Mike has assisted with the effort to implement the agency's National Best Management Practices program. Mike has worked for the USDOI's Bureau of Land Management as its water lead and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service's Pacific Region Chief of Water Resources in Portland, Oregon. So with that, we'll turn it over then to Mike.
Okay, we're getting there. Oh, we had it. It doesn't want to stay on the, there we go. We're going to try this one. There we go. Okay, so first, thank you very much for inviting me to speak on the Watershed Condition Framework today. The Watershed Condition Framework uses
hey, Mike?
GIS. Yes?
I'm not seeing it yet. Anybody else seeing it?
No, we're not seeing it.
Can you try sharing again?
You may have to go to that Quick Start tab to see the share my desktop.
There you go. There you go. Or almost. I still see a green screen.
Okay.
There it goes. You see it.
All right, thank you very much. I'm sorry for that little glitch there. I was going to say that the Watershed Conditions Framework uses GIS, but specifically the NHD, WBD data, not only as an analysis tool for the restoration work it does, but also we're finding it very helpful in just a huge communication tool. A big part of the Watershed Conditions Framework is the interaction it allows the individual forests to have with partners in their area, and when they can look at watersheds or subwatersheds on a map and take a look at the resources involved, it just makes the communication aspect of it much cleaner and much easier. So they're all speaking of the same language. So throughout the talk, we'll be talking about priority watersheds, and I wanted to be clear that these are the 12 digits, so they're realistically the subwatersheds, but they're the 12-digit HUC6s. That's the entity that it was decided to focus on with the Watershed Condition Framework. So today's talk, I'm going to give you a little bit of background on why we initiated the Watershed Condition Framework. I'll talk a little bit on what the WCF is, and then at the end we'll bring in a little bit of some GIS data and tools and resources that we've been using to move forward. First, a little bit about the Forest Service. The mission of the Forest Service is to sustain health, diversity, and productivity of the nation's forests and grasslands for the present and future generations. And that guides a lot of what we do. So where are the national forests and grasslands? This is a quick overview. The green are the forests, and the tan areas are the national grasslands. At a glance, the Forest Service is one of the what I consider 4 of the largest land management agencies in the United States. There's, of course, the BLM, Forest Service, Park Service, and the Fish and Wildlife Service. The Forest Service manages about 193 million acres. That's about 8.5% of the total area. It's broken up into 9 regions that we use for, they're geographically aligned, of course. It consists of about 155 national forests. Some forests have been combined, and so if you look it up, you may see fewer, probably closer to 114. But as far as individually named forests, there's 155 of them. And we're in almost every state. There's 6 states that we're not presently in. So some fast facts about the Forest Service: 18% of the water in the United States comes off of Forest Service lands. Of course, that's a lot more higher percentage in the western U.S. than in the eastern United States. We provide drinking water to over 180 million people. Lots of habitat, lots for the threatened and endangered species. And this is a good one. One of the things we do is a multiple-use mandate, and people come on the Forest Service lands for many reasons, including, of course, fishing and kayaking, canoeing on over the 220,000 miles of streams and 2.3 million acres of lakes, ponds, and reservoirs. So it's a lot of water, and water is a big deal for us. The chief focus of the chief, of course, improvement of water resources, maintaining the water quality. The Forest Service recently laid out a strategic plan covering FY15 to FY20, or 2015 to 2020, and one of the major goals was to keep providing or improve upon the providing of the clean water to the American public. Also included is sustaining of jobs and the restoration of the landscapes. So now let's try to focus on the WCF. So why did we develop the Watershed Condition Framework? Well, certainly restoration wasn't new to the Forest Service, but what had happened is we were having trouble really being accountable and holding ourselves accountable. We had these a lot of restoration money came to the Forest Service, and we were doing these little restoration projects here and there, but there was no way for us to roll up that information and show really Congress that all of these tiny restoration efforts were actually beneficial in the end. And so the watershed condition framework was organized, and it is a way to show this and the impacts of the restoration on both the local scale and then also up to the national scale. So it's a comprehensive approach for restoring watersheds. The WCF is focused primarily on the aquatic side of restoration. It does have some accounting for upland terrestrial restoration and the impact that may have on the watershed health, and that is taken into account. But the primary focus is on aquatic aspects, and you'll see that soon. And as I mentioned, the multiple scales is very important, and it's hard to do to find a solution that means something on the ground when you're working with partners and have that same action kind of roll up and still tell the story at the national level. So the watershed condition framework, I'm going to review these 6 steps, go over them pretty quickly. But it's a 6-step circular process, and that coming back to the beginning is an important aspect. So step A is really doing an assessment on what is the condition of our watershed. It was a rapid assessment back in 2000. It was late 2010, early 2011 when we initially did this. We had a set of criteria that we set out as far as how the watershed should score based on the indicators and how it's scored out. It was done by a group of professionals, mixed disciplines. You can see there from hydrologists, fish biologists, soil scientists, and it was really heavily relying on their professional judgment of the employees. And number 3 there, it did use a lot of local data, GIS data layered, and national databases. Now, one thing that we're real proud of is on the watershed condition framework, because this is a nationwide effort that was done in a consistent basis. And to do that with the Forest Service or any type of any one of the kind of the land management agencies on a large scale to develop that consistency is a very difficult thing to do, especially since some data, some areas are data rich and other areas might be data poor, and so trying to write standards to follow it's a tightrope sometimes. So these are the 12 indicators, and the kind of the model on the left side just shows you how we organize those. So there's aquatic, physical, and aquatic biological, and then terrestrial, physical, and terrestrial biological. One thing we're going to come back to at the end is really the first 7 from water quality down to soils. Those are the indicators that really lend themselves well to data that's available in using GIS or NHD and WBD. And as I said, I'll talk more about that later. So we did the assessment, and this is how the results of the assessment. The green areas are where the watersheds were determined to be functioning properly. The yellow is where the watersheds were functioning at risk, and the red areas are where the impaired function. And this is how it came out, I guess, statistically. Out of the 15,000 watersheds that we assessed, just over half of them were functioning properly, and only 3% were impaired. So step B was, so after we did the assessment, we had to figure out how we were going to focus our efforts and on which priority watersheds we were going to focus. Selection criteria were active collaboration and partnership opportunities, as I said before, partnerships and development and enhancement, nurturing of partnerships was a important aspect of the WCF. We had to think about where there were ecological or social or economic considerations, and what other partners were going on with other agencies as well. But I think it's important to understand that this wasn't necessarily looking at the worst watersheds and trying to work on them first. That way of looking at watershed restoration can be very expensive. Those watersheds, the red ones, can be very, very compromised, and it would take a lot of money to improve those. Whereas sometimes even the what we call the green watersheds, or the watersheds that are already functioning properly, they could be trending downwards for a variety of reasons. And by putting a little money into those watersheds, little investment in resources, it could keep them at the green level. So all these considerations had to be taken into account. So the stars areas are where the kind of the first round of the priority watersheds were. I do want to say something that address at the bottom, the interactive mapping address. It was just bad timing, I guess. About 3 weeks ago, they were transferring a bunch of data and updating not the database, but where the data is housed, and trying to update it. And going through that update, it made the interactive mapper not functional. And so I had to, we had been using it for years. It worked out real well, and now it's not working. But we are hoping to get it back online in about a week or two. But I wanted to let everyone know that. And so once we figure out where we're going to do the work, we have to try to think about what work needs to be done. So we develop a watershed restoration action plan. Again, we reach out to partners. We take a look at a lot of the data that we have, and this is an excellent point of being able to map out, on the different hubs, exactly what areas are impaired and what areas are doing well using those 12 indicators. And it was a real helpful tool to bring people around and to get the partners that we wanted. There are partners who are big believers in fish passage or fish, and they could see where maybe the fish weren't able to move around as well, or where there are issues associated with that. We have partners that are very focused on our road system, and they could see where the roads were having issues or potentially contributing to the detriment of the watershed. And so these maps were very helpful. So what goes into a RAP? So the list of partners, the key watershed issues, the important ecological values, and then really a real important thing is really how much is this going to cost to help to improve this watershed. Step D of the watershed condition framework is to implement the projects in the RAP. Initially we thought they'd take between 3 and 5 years, but we're finding out that they are taking a little bit longer, up to 6 to 7 years potentially, depending on how much NEPA needs to get done and just how prepared the forest was initially ready to do those. And then the second to the last step is tracking those accomplishments. So when these essential projects were completed on the ground, to put them into a GIS database and map out the area that was worked on or that was improved, and to be able to track it through systematically. And this is an important aspect too for the Forest Service. It seems a lot of things that we do are focused on outputs and outcomes, meaning board foot of timber or soil and water acres improved, or those type of very high level targets. And what the watershed condition framework is, it's a new type of a target called, it's more of an outcome. It's a recognized target that takes years to develop and to achieve. It's not a per year basis. And really the Forest Service is still having trouble speaking in terms of outcomes over outputs. outputs have been around for years and are very much a part of our culture. And then finally, the step F is to monitor. Did we do what we said we were going to do, and does it have the effect that we thought it would have? And now, so what we thought it was the impact that we thought it would have is based largely on personal or professional experience and expertise, but it's also based on models that we can develop. And there are many GIS models, and I'll talk about those also. So I did want to just, even though the interactive map is not currently working, it is very useful for our partners and the general public to go in and take a look at the work that we're doing through the interactive mapping software. Let's see. Oh, so this is an example. If you zoom in to anywhere you want in the United States and look at the different HUC codes, you can pick those, and the information that's shown are the indicator scores. You can take a look at a copy of the Watershed Restoration Action Plan. You can take a look at what partners are working with us to improve that area and what the projects actually are. And you can even we even put information on there that describes why that watershed was determined to be a priority. Again, unfortunately, it's not working. I really wish it would. So going back to the indicators and taking a look at the top 7, I just wanted to give everyone an idea of what these indicators say or general description. So water quality is pretty straightforward. It expresses the alteration physical, chemical, and biological components of the water quality. And I won't read all of these to you, but I wanted to give you everyone a sense on kind of the very high level kind of general questions that they're asking. And for water quality, I'm going to go a little deeper. And so this is the kind of the rule, the guidance that was given. And so you can see for the water quality indicator, it's over here in the attributes. It's either impaired waters if it's on 303D list, or if it's not on the 303D list. And if it is on the 303D list, then, if they do exist, then basically, so it's either good, it's fair, or it's poor, just based on these criteria of, no listed watersheds less than 10% or more than 10%. And then we also provide examples for them to use in case they had questions on what makes sense or what doesn't. So there are rules like this for each of the 12 indicators, and actually, that information is available on the internet if you want. I want to say thanks to EPA for lending me this slide. This was a great example of what I mean by a communication tool and how beneficial it can be when working with partners or even within the Forest Service itself, just be able to see something graphically. So quickly, this is just some random watersheds, and again, the red areas are the HUC 6s. But here you have a TMDL section. These thicker lines are where there's actually a TMDL in place. The green here are supporting waters, and the yellows are the impaired waters. And so looking at them here, it's really hard to get a sense on how that impacts the watershed. And so EPA is beginning to kind of model it into catchments where you can now take a look at the same watershed and you can see where the catchments that are impacted by these 303D listed streams or by the water quality. And again, by looking at it on a map like this, it just makes a lot more sense to the folks that we're working with, to the people on the ground and our partners, to show how projects within those catchment areas can impact which ones may impact the water quality and contribute to the water quality issue. So thanks again to EPA for that. looking at the other watershed condition indicators, there are many sources of information for data and tools out there. Last week, I went to the Science on your in your watershed site that USGS has, and it has a link to it talks about, of course, the NAQUA program that it has, the National Water Quality Assessment Program. You can find links to the Sparrow model and to the WARP model, and it's just a lot of information depending on how what you already know about your data or about your watershed, and what other tools you may need. Also, the EPA, the WATERS, which is the Watershed Assessment Tracking and Environmental Results System. It contains a lot of handy tools for people to use and to be able to model their watersheds. And of course, if you have tried to surf your watershed, it has very specific localized information, as well as a list to potential partners, people who are interested in helping out with the watershed restorations, on their own, what interests there are, what their specific areas of interest, either a particular reach of a stream or a particular attribute that may be causing that. The last one I have here is the terrain works, and the terrain works is or net maps, I guess it's also referred to. It contains a lot of just real important tools as far as fish habitat mapping, road analysis. It contains links to grape analysis, the geomorphic road and analysis and inventory package. And this is a tool developed by the Forest Service that really helps hone in on where so what it does, it looks at DEMs and looks at the road systems, and it can calculate pretty accurately, the potential the high impact areas of allowing sediment into the stream. So if you're trying to figure out where we should do road work, you can take a look at those potential high impact areas and focus your efforts there. Again, it gives you a little roadmap on where to do the most work, and partners find that very, very valuable. But as I said earlier, the data availability varies quite a bit. There are areas where that are data rich and areas that are data poor. And so as consistent as the rule set is across the United States to do these watershed condition assessments, the results vary also. And we have to kind of keep that in the back of our mind as we're looking at all this data. So a quick summary. For the first time, we have a nationwide tool to systematically implement watershed restoration. We focus on partnerships. They are essential to the success of the WCF. And as I said, communication tools are the key. And we also recognize that the WCF is not perfect. There are questions about the indicators, how the management of the forest systems lands can actually impact the indicators, whether or not you can see that result. But we believe it will improve over time as we get kind of used to it and we begin to better understand its true applicability. So looking to the future, as I said, the WCF is focused pretty heavily on the aquatic aspect. We would like to spend a little more time, a little more energy on the terrestrial aspect of the watershed restoration. So even doing veg management work or doing work in the uplands away from the water can impact the health of the stream and has say over the health of the whole watershed. And we need to get a better understanding of that. We're going to continue to implement and improve the WCF program. And then also right now the field is undergoing a limited reassessment of some watersheds, so doing that step A all over again. And that's being done with improved information, some data sets that didn't exist 5 years ago. In some areas, we've had pretty dramatic fires between 5 years ago and now. that impacts the health of the watershed. There's a number of reasons why a forest would decide to do this reassessment. And as I said, that's occurring now, and it should be completed by the end of February 2016. So anyway, so that's my talk for today. Again, I want to emphasize, that the way that we can look at what needs to be done on the ground, the impact it has with the impact that restoration work has on the aquatic species, it's made fundamentally easier and more efficient through the use of the NHD and the WPD and the GIS tools that we have available to us. So, are we ready to take questions?
Yeah, we are, Mike. Thanks a lot. So good presentation. Appreciate that. We're going to turn it over to Sue Buto and Alan Ray to talk about some of the questions that have been coming in. And Al, Sue, you might want to just kind of lead off by reminding people how they might be able to ask questions through the question and answer feature of the WebEx.
Okay, sure. This is Al, and I'll explain that. So on your screen where you're seeing Mike's desktop, if you put your cursor up near the top, you should see a menu that will pull down, and there's a Q&A button on that menu. It'll open up a little panel, and you can just type your question in there. And then Sue and I will be viewing those, and we will ask those questions of Mike and get him to answer it. So, Sue, you've got one queued up and ready to go?
I do. Charlie Palmer is asking, does the WCF include Alaska?
Yes, it does. We have two national forests in Alaska, the Chugach and the Tongass, and both of those have gone through the assessment, watershed condition framework assessment.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Just real quick, should I hit the stop sharing button and we'll go back?
No, we don't really need to, but yeah, you can go ahead.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll leave this up. That's fine.
Yeah, it depends on if someone asks a question specifically about a slide. So let's just keep it there for a sec. So another question came in asking about that some HUC-12s are not true watersheds, and are you taking this into consideration in using the HUC-12s for your the basis of your assessments?
I'm not sure. I mean, maybe are they speaking of where it may be along like a lake, and there's sometimes a number of smaller watersheds are grouped together into considered a sub-watershed? I'm afraid I'm not understanding that question.
Right. So the question's from Mark Weber. Mark, do you want to hit, let's see, *6? You can unmute yourself if you want to explain more. So he's saying that, I see. He's talking about HUC-12s that have upstream HUC-12s from them. So the HUC-12 itself isn't a full watershed.
Oh, okay. Right. So, that really comes into almost a step, choosing that watershed as a priority watershed. There are a number of instances where, for example, water quality impacts or how the water quality is in a downstream watershed is really because of the upland or the upstream watershed water quality. For areas where there's a lot of mining are like that. The legacy mining that has occurred way upstream, that impact can be felt for going downstream quite a ways. And so there's very little, I shouldn't say very little, but there's really a minimal amount of work that can be done in that downstream watershed to improve that water quality, because again, the impact originates upstream. And so that's really, it all comes into when you choose your priority watershed, you you try to figure out, hey, can we actually improve the condition of this watershed? And can we come up with projects to make this watershed healthier and move it up to the next condition class? And so in a case like that where you have upstream impacts and you're not, and if it's outside your area of focus, then that, I would say, that may not be your best choice for your priority watershed.
So another question, Mike, is the framework based on a snapshot of the WBD circa 2011? And if so, do you refresh or plan to refresh those data to capture updates in the data set?
So the original was the circa 2011 data set. I know, I'm aging myself there. But no, there was an update done in the I believe in 2013, late 14, and actually with that there was some additional work done along the Canadian border at that time, and so the watersheds went from 15,064 up to like 15,087. And so those kind of, quote, new watersheds, or on the map new watersheds, they had to be assessed for the first time by that national forest. And so we just did an analysis just a few months ago about updating the WBD again, and we found a very similar results based on some additional clarification down along Mexico, and so we do update them, and however the watersheds change or modified, we do update the scoring of those either by scoring, quote, a new watershed, or by assessing that new watershed.
Okay, we've got another question, and I'm not completely sure if I understand it, but I'll see if you do, Mike. So are the different activities ranked by use, such as active versus passive uses, in comparing the type of activities on the watershed?
No. So, I mean, maybe comparing ranked on the uses, no. That level of categorization is not done as far as impacts to the watershed itself.
Okay. So we haven't got any other questions in. If anybody has more questions, go ahead and ask them. I have one that I'll ask, though, and that's so it looks like your assessment units basically are the 12-digit HUCs. Is that, are you finding that those are the right size for what you want to do, or do you find there's need for smaller units? I know that for some reason, for some purposes, people have been talking about making smaller units than the 12-digit HUCs.
Right. Actually, that's a great question. We get that question a lot as far as how do we decide on a specific area. Well, going back to why we initiated the WCF to begin with is that we needed to show that what we were doing on the ground, the Forest Service, what the management it was doing on the ground was able to improve the condition. And what was decided was that the 12-digit HUCs, which range between 10 to 40,000 acres, that was the right management unit size to do this. I mean, there are instances where actually that people like to look at larger areas. For example, when you're talking about fish or looking at endangered or threatened fish and fish passage, a lot of that could be more of the fifth level HUC, so a combination of a few, and so looking at a larger landscape, because that's really what focus, or that's the focus area you would need for that species. So there is a kind of a give and take. Certainly down at the catchment level, or smaller than the HUC 12, there are certain areas, where maybe some road work or some, mining, abandoned mine land work would make a lot more sense to look at it through that smaller level. But I think overall, aside from certainly rationale on both sides, the HUD 12 seems to be a real good size for us. That the work that we can do again over that 3 to 7 year period, it can be focused in that area, and that seems to be again a size that Congress or people that we're reporting to, they accepted it. OMB accepted that size as kind of our area that actually means something to them. So anyway, so bottom line now is that HUD 12s or where we are. There are times when we need to look bigger or smaller, but overall the 12s are where we are.
Okay, great. Thanks.
All right, well, we'll cut off the questions here and move on to the next presentation. I will point out that Mike's presentation will be available both as a recording and as a transcript and as PowerPoint slides to you in a few days or weeks. So keep an eye on the USGS NHD website. That's just simply nhd.usgs.gov, and click on the Hydrography Seminar Series and look for Seminar 5, and you'll find all the information you need for that. So we're going to come up to our first lightning talk, which is by David Ritchie on preserving high-quality riparian vegetation. And we'll get a chance for David to get his slides going there. And while we're doing that, I'll tell you a little bit about David. He's a senior GIS analyst at the Lane Council of Governments in Eugene, Oregon. He has practiced spatial data analysis for 20 years with a research and professional focus on agriculture and riparian landscapes. His current work focuses on the Mackenzie Voluntary Incentives Program, a payment for ecosystem services project protecting and restoring riparian vegetation for the Eugene Water and Electric Board. So, David, we see your slides.
You hear my voice?
We hear your voice.
Excellent.
And take it away for the next 5 minutes.
All right. So again, my name is David Ritchie. I'm with Lane Council of Governments. Today I'm talking about delineating an eligibility area for the Mackenzie Voluntary Incentives Program, or VIP. The VIP is a payment for ecosystem services riparian protection and restoration program. It's supported by multiple agency and community partners and is focused on engaging and enrolling private landowners in non-compulsory actions that support multiple desired landscape functions with a focus on preserving drinking water quality. One element of the program is determining the eligibility or program area, those lands that are most significant for protecting water quality and riparian function. The Mackenzie River provides drinking water to over 200,000 people in the Eugene-Springfield area. So we had a number of goals for delineating the program area. The first goal is to have it be credibly science-based, and for that we turned to the Nature Conservancy's active river area model as a peer-reviewed GIS model for characterizing the landscape. The second goal is that it's easily explained to a lay audience. Again, this is an enrollment program for private landowners, and so we wanted to be able to describe the program area as the area of dynamic connection and interaction between the water and the land through which it frequently or occasionally flows. So this isn't specifically tied to flood events or flood frequencies. We wanted the delineation method to be repeatable in other watersheds. So the model depends primarily on nationally available NHD and USGS DEM data sets. And lastly, we wanted the program to be useful for analysis and evaluation. So the model defines or identifies a broad set of landscape elements rather than solely focusing on the riparian area. And as part of its output, the model produces a cost surface, so not necessarily a hard boundary, increasing the flexibility of the output and its use. So again, this is the Nature Conservancy's active river area model. It estimates a riparian area as well as other landscape components, and it's not tied to a specific flood extent. In the use of the NHD and the USGS DEM, in particular, it relies on the stream order attribute, which is not available throughout the U.S., at least at the high resolution level. And so next month's seminar might shed some light on that. The code is open, by which I don't mean it's open source, but rather you can dig into the code. It isn't password protected, and the model was very rapid to deploy, and it's well documented using known Esri tools. So conceptually, the watershed is divided up into 3 longitudinal sections of headwaters, streams, and rivers. From these, 3 functional landscape types are identified: the active river area, wet flat areas, and material contribution areas. Again, the slope-based cost surface model is used to identify these. Cost surface is calculated on a cellular basis, moving away from the water feature, accumulating values as it goes. The values for each cell that are accumulated are generated by multiplying the slope times the distance traversing each cell. So you could think of this as a proxy for water friction or for flood extent. The model is calibrated by comparing it against known flood data sets, such as FEMA flood zones, or if you have actual records of flood occurrence. In our work, we calibrated the model against a provisional USGS data set describing the Holocene floodplain from Rose-Wallach. Thresholds are set to cover the majority of the reference flood extent, and the resultant active river area will exceed the reference feature in some areas and not in others. Other landscape types, such as the wet flat areas and so on, are calibrated against other known reference data sets. But again, for this program, because it's a riparian protection program, we focused on the riverine and stream delineations for program implementation. The model produces, again, these different landscape types, which we're looking at using in future work with the Voluntary Incentives Program. The active river area is the focus of our program currently, as it sets the program eligibility area for the VIP. And so on the left there, you can see a more full suite of the headwater, stream, river categories by the 3 landscape types, and then on the right there is the actual VIP initial program boundary. Again, this is a project that's been going on since 2010, 2011. We hope it continues on for years, and it's supported by multiple partners. You can see their names here. And that's about it for this lightning talk. Thank you so much for your attendance.
Okay, David, thanks a lot. Good. And once again, David's slides will be available, and this recording will be available in the next few days or weeks, and you'll be able to access that through the nhd.usgs.gov website. Click on Hydrography Seminar Series. We're going to go right to our next lightning talk, which is by Curtis Price, and this is about stream gauge drainage area boundaries. As Curtis sets up here, I'll tell you a little bit about Curtis. He's a physical scientist and GIS specialist with the U.S. Geological Survey. He has been supporting GIS applications as a member of the USGS Enterprise GIS team for more than 20 years. His research interests include raster data analysis and landscape characterization. So, and if we have time after Curtis's talk, then you can ask some questions to both David and Curtis. But we're ready to take it away, Curtis. We see your slide, and welcome to the lightning talk.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to talk to you today a little bit about a project we got started last year, leveraging national data sets that now exist, and I just want to say it's a really exciting time for all of us to be involved in GIS, because these national data sets are starting to allow us to do things we never could do before, and I think the talks we've heard so far today really kind of push that forward. So I'm going to switch the slide right now and see if it changes for everyone else.
Yep. Okay.
A lot of this is based on the Watershed Boundary Dataset, which is a national seamless watershed polygon fabric that covers the entire continental United States and Alaska and Hawaii, and a little bit of some other places too. As was mentioned before, these watersheds aren't cumulative watersheds. Sometimes they flow from one to the other, And so they're not all what we call headwater watersheds. Some are coastal, they have all kinds of different things. And one thing that's very wonderful about this data set is that it's based on, it has local input in terms of where those lines get drawn, because sometimes the DEM isn't the whole story. Sometimes there's some local things going on that make a difference. So this data has been looked at by a lot of people that know about the landscape. So it's a great, allows us to, when we use it with the rest of the NHD, it can be very powerful. So our problem here is we have drainage areas and watershed boundaries, and we need them all the time. They're critical to analysis of all kinds of hydrologic data. And I work within the water theme of USGS, so this is especially important to us. And delineations have done in different ways across the country, but we have this national consistent watershed boundary data set boundary that we can work with. So if we could have a nationally consistent way of building watersheds from our USGS gauges, that would be really great. It'd benefit everyone that uses our data. So that's why we're doing this. So here's the issue. We have a watershed where, we have that watershed. It could have developed a lot of ways. We might have gotten it from a DEM, something else. We might have had it delineated off quad sheets. Then we have the watershed boundaries, and we're not quite lined up on them. So that's a problem, because we need to, if the gauge was right on the WBD boundary, that'd be really great. So we can't do that. So we want to somehow put these together, and down near the tie point here, make a watershed, and then use the boundary of the watershed boundary data set above that. So we have these ingredients. We have our watershed we got from somewhere. We have these WBD watersheds that exist, and then we have pour points that we're using that were developed using NHD+. And I urge you to come to the January meeting to learn more about what's happening recently with NHD+. It's pretty exciting. So here's some real life watersheds. I live down here. That's me. That's my office right there anyway. And there's a gauge, USGS gauge right here. This isn't quite on the boundary. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in down here to this area, kind of in here, which is about 2 miles across. So we're zoomed in here. Here's our USGS gauge right here. And it has its own watershed that may look kind of like, this. It won't line up. Say we did our watershed with DEM or something. It may not line up exactly. So what we want to do is get that. And so what we do is we do a delineation. We take that delineation, we clip it to the bottom hydrologic unit. You can see on the left there's one hydrologic unit. It has a from and a to code. On the right we have another hydrologic unit with a from and a to code, and we want to put them together. Well, the easiest way to find out where that's going to be is to actually use the elevation-derived locations to find this pour point, which is the point at which this watershed on the left flows to the watershed to the right. So we have this clipped area, and then we use this point to grab this whole Huck 12. So let me go on to the next slide. You'll see kind of what that looks like. You'll see this purple line here, and it shows our original thing, and then we basically, once we got to the boundary, we grabbed the rest of it. So now we have these two watersheds, and that's our starting point. And then what we can do is we can find all these blue lines here, all the Huck 12s upstream. Here are the two down here we were working with, these two right here. Here's our little watershed and our big one here. Then we can add, using the 2Huck attribute that's on every single Huck 12, everything upstream like this. And so we have our wonderful put-together watershed that is a true, complete watershed. Then we pass it around to the water science centers to go ahead and we have offices around the country, and they check them out, make sure they're okay. That's my little timer going off there. And they basically, we get them reviewed. And then when we're done with that, we can go ahead and load them up into the new data model that's going to be part of NHD. So the fact that we have these national data sets makes it possible. These gauge polygons will be available through the NHD to the public in a batch download. We're still getting them completed. And we aim to provide a web service. So, for example, you're looking at a gauge on a gauge record on NWIS Web, which is our service that serves our USGS surface water data. You can click a box and get the polygon. That's the idea. So that's kind of what I have today. Hopefully we can do more about this later, and I again recommend the January talk to you, because it really focuses in on some of the raw data that's going to make even more analysis like this possible.
Good, Curtis. Great job. Thanks. Lots of good information there. And once again, Curtis's slides will be available through the Hydro Seminar Series website at nhd.usgs.gov. And this whole session has been recorded, so you'll be able to watch the recording. You'll also be able to read a transcript, so look for that. Also, as Curtis mentioned, we have an upcoming presentation January 21st on high-resolution NHD+, which is able to do a lot of things for us as the program continues to produce more and more rich data on water in the United States. There's a poll questions that we have about your opinion of this presentation, and we appreciate if you would fill out that poll, and so we can find out what we can do better in the future. So tell us what worked about this, what didn't work about it, and then also suggestions for what we can do in the future. So we're looking for your ideas about topics we can present, and so please give those to us, and we'll line those up for the future. If you're doing interesting work involving hydrography and involved in the NHD, WBD, or NHD+, please help our seminar series and offer to give a presentation. So with that, any final comments from or questions or answers from Sue or Al? Anything that is left hanging?
No, I don't think we had any additional questions.
Okay, good. All right. Well, with that then, we'll wrap it up for today. We're just a few minutes short of the hour. Thanks for attending, and we look forward to having you attend our next session. Thanks.